In the town of Miller's Creek, there was a sound that everyone knew. It was the soft click and scrape of a key being cut, coming from a narrow shop on 2nd Street, with a hand-painted sign that read, "Odom's Lock and Key." Walter Odom had been behind that counter for 43 years. He was not a large man, and he was not a loud one. He wore the same grey canvas apron every day, worn soft at the pockets from decades of pliers and picks. People brought him their broken locks, their lost keys, their jammed deadbolts, and Walter fixed them without ever seeming to hurry. He believed a lock deserved the same patience as anything else worth for the shop. Walter had spent 6 years working under an old locksmith named Gus Petrakis, sweeping floors and sorting keys for almost no pay, just to learn the trade properly. Gus used to tell him that a man who rushed a lock would eventually break it, and a man who rushed his money would eventually lose it. Walter never forgot that. When Gus retired and closed his shop rather than sell it, Walter walked 3 towns over to the Miller's Creek Savings Bank and asked for a loan to start his own. He had opened the shop in 1974 with a loan of $2,200 from the Miller's Creek Savings Bank. He signed the papers in the office of a loan officer named Elias Halloway, a careful man who had watched 100 small businesses open and close in that town. Something about Walter's steady hands and quiet manner made Halloway take an interest that went beyond the loan, doing right. A year later, once Walter's shop was turning a small but reliable profit, Halloway invited him to sit for coffee. He told Walter something that most people in town never bothered to hear. He said that a man did not need to be rich to become wealthy. He only needed to be consistent. Halloway explained that if Walter set aside a portion of what he earned every single month and placed it into a broad fund that owned pieces of hundreds of American companies, time itself would do the heaviest lifting. Walter did not fully understand the mechanics that day. Halloway drew a simple picture on a napkin, a line moving up and to the right, jagged in places but always climbing over the long run. He told Walter not to look at the jagged parts. Look at where the line ended up. That was the only part that mattered if a man had the patience to wait. Walter folded the napkin and kept it in his wallet for years until it wore through at the creases. He understood patience because patience was the whole of his trade. He opened an account with $60. For the rest of his life, Walter treated that monthly deposit the way he treated the shop's rent. It was not optional. It was not something he did with what was left over. It came first, before anything else, the same week his paycheck arrived. Some months it was $60. In better years it grew to $200, then $400, then more. He never told anyone about it, not out of secrecy, but because to Walter it simply was not remarkable. It was just what a responsible man did with his money, the same way he oiled a hinge before it could rust. 1987 arrived, and the stock market fell hard in a single October afternoon. Walter heard about it on the radio while he was rekeying a farmhouse door. That evening, instead of pulling his money out like so many others did, he sat at his kitchen table and wrote his usual deposit slip. His wife, Ruth, asked him if he was worried. Walter told her that a falling price was not a falling company. The businesses were still open in the morning. People still needed bread, still needed cars, still needed locks. He kept depositing. Walter and Ruth raised 2 children in a small house 3 blocks from the shop. There were no lavish vacations, no new cars bought on credit. Ruth kept a garden that fed the family through most of the summer, and Walter mowed lawns on Saturdays for extra income when the children were young. Neighbors remembered him as a man who would fix a stuck window for free, but would not accept a loan he could not repay. He carried no debt beyond the shop itself, and that was paid off by 1983. The dot-com crash came in 2000, and then, 8 years later, a far larger storm arrived in 2008. Walter was 61 years old by then, close enough to retirement that many financial advisors would have told him to pull back, to protect what he had built. Instead, he did what he had always done. He read the newspaper headlines about the collapsing banks, finished his coffee, and walked to the shop to open at 8 o'clock sharp. That month, when his account statement arrived, showing his balance cut nearly in half on paper, he did not open it right away. He set it on the kitchen table, unopened for 3 full days, the way he might let a stuck lock sit before forcing it. Down the street, a neighbor named Tom Brennan sold everything he owned in the market that autumn. certain the whole system was collapsing for good. Tom told Walter he was a fool for staying in. Walter just nodded and kept sweeping his front step. He simply kept depositing the same amount on the same schedule as he had for 34 years. 5 years later, when the market had not only recovered but climbed well past its old highs, Tom never brought the subject up again, and Walter never mentioned it either. His son Daniel asked him once why he never seemed to worry about the market. Walter told him that worry was for people who checked their balance every week. He checked his twice a year, in January and in July, and even then he mostly just confirmed the deposit had gone through. He was not interested in performance. He was interested in the habit. In 2015, Ruth passed away after a short illness. Walter kept working. The shop was not just income to him anymore. It was rhythm, and rhythm was something he needed more than ever. He trained a young apprentice named Marcus, a 19-year-old from the east side of town who had been in some trouble before Walter gave him a chance. Most shop owners in Miller's Creek would not hire a boy with Marcus's record, but Walter remembered what it felt like to be given a chance by Gus Petrakis, and he was not about to let that debt go unpaid. Walter taught him the trade the same way Holloway had once taught him about money, slowly, without lecturing, mostly by example. In the evenings after the shop closed, he would show Marcus the same napkin drawing Holloway had once shown him, the jagged line climbing up and to the right, and tell him that patience was a tool just like any other on the wall, and it needed practice to use well. He paid Marcus fairly and, without telling him directly, opened a small retirement account in Marcus's name. Seeding it with the first year of profit sharing, he insisted on building into the apprenticeship. It was the same kind of quiet gift Holloway had once given him, passed forward without ceremony. Walter worked until he was 81 years old. On a quiet Tuesday morning in March, his daughter Claire found him in his favorite chair, a cup of coffee still warm on the side table, a paperback western open on his lap. At the funeral, half the town came through the doors of the small Baptist church on Elm Street. Farmers, teachers, the sheriff, the woman who ran the diner, all of them had a Walter Odom story, a broken lock he had fixed on a Sunday, a spare key he had cut for free when someone was locked out in the rain. The sheriff stood up during the service and told a story about a January night years earlier when an elderly widow had locked herself out in freezing temperatures. Walter had driven out at 2 in the morning without being asked twice, in his pajamas under his coat, and refused to take a dime for it. Stories like that one moved through the pews for nearly an hour, each one small on its own, but together painting the portrait of a man who had spent his whole life quietly showing up for other people. It was 3 weeks later, while Claire and Daniel were sorting through his modest house, that they found a small metal box tucked behind a shelf of tool catalogs in the workshop. Inside was a single manila folder, and inside that folder was a stack of statements going back nearly 50 years, along with a handwritten note in Walter's careful block letter. He note read simply, "To my children." This was never about the money, it was about the discipline. Use it well. Behind the note sat the most recent statement, dated the previous December. The account started with $60 in 1975 and fed faithfully every single month for 49 years, had grown to $2,340,000. Neither Claire nor Daniel had ever suspected. Their father had driven the same pickup truck for 18 years. He had patched the same work boots 3 times rather than buy new ones. He had never once mentioned a figure, never bragged, never even hinted. Claire sat on the workshop floor, holding the statement for a long time, running her finger down the list of decades, watching the number grow from hundreds to thousands to hundreds of thousands, until it finally crossed into 7 figures somewhere around the year 2019. Daniel kept saying it did not seem possible, that this was the same man who reused envelopes and saved rubber bands in a coffee can. But the paper trail was there, statement after statement, unbroken for 49 straight years. He had simply kept showing up, kept cutting keys, kept making his deposit, decade after decade, storm after storm. The family used a portion of the inheritance to pay off their own homes. But the largest piece, at Claire's insistence, and in keeping with the spirit of their father's note, went towards something else entirely. They established the Walter Odom Trade Scholarship, a fund that pays for tools, training, and small business loans for young locksmiths, electricians and tradespeople across the county who show the same quiet discipline their father had valued above all else. In its first year alone, the fund helped 11 young tradespeople open their own shops, each of them given the same simple advice printed on a card tucked inside their welcome packet. Save something every month, no matter how small, and never stop. Marcus, now running Odom's Lock and Key himself, still opens the shop at 8 o'clock sharp. On the wall behind the register, framed in simple wood, hangs a copy of Walter's handwritten note. Every new apprentice who walks through that door reads it before they ever pick up a single tool. Walter Odom never earned a large salary. He never made a bold investment or a lucky bet. He simply understood something that so many people spend their whole lives searching for. Wealth is rarely built in a single dramatic moment. It is built in thousands of small, unremarkable ones, repeated without fail for as long as it takes. He opened locks for 43 years so that other people could get back into their homes. In the end, without ever meaning to, he had quietly unlocked something far larger for the people he loved most, and for a whole town that never once suspected the fortune sitting quietly behind an ordinary man's steady hand.